Coming up this week, we're going to be chatting with Sean Webb about his recent work with ASLR and PIE in FreeBSD. After that, we're going to be showing how you can create a reverse SSH tunnel to a system behind a firewall. Very, very sneaky. Answer to your emails, plus the latest news, all here on BSD Now, the place to be, SD. BSD Now, episode 52, Reverse Takeover, recorded August 27th, 2014. Hey, I'm your host, Chris Moore.
And I'm Alan Jude.
I'm glad to have you guys with us this week. We got another exciting show coming, and we should mention what's next week, our 1 year anniversary.
Yes.
It's coming soon.
Can you believe we've been doing this every week for a year already?
It's hard to believe.
Yeah.
Time is going by so fast, but and I mean, that means what, 52, 53 episodes? Yeah. I mean, good Lord, that's a lot of video content.
And we've never taken a week off. We've pre-recorded in order to do a conference, but we've never actually just missed a week.
True, that is true. So,
which is just amazing in and of itself. You know, we're both very busy people. How we manage to not miss a week is pretty amazing.
Yep, and we're going to be doing that again soon when we head to Euro. Yep. So we'll probably record another little half segment or whatever, and
we'll get something
show
out
up with all our fancy interviews when we get back.
So if you're at EuroBSDCon, you better hide because we're going to interview everyone.
Yeah. You've been warned. Wear your nice shirt.
Yes.
We're coming for an interview.
There you go. You got to try to show up Sean Webb, who you'll see later in this episode.
Yes. He totally outdid us. Yes. I felt, really undressed when I did the interview. Yeah. I'm like, man, is that a tie? I don't even know what that is. I can't see online.
Yeah.
Wow, it was really cool, though. Yeah. Okay, well, enough of that. Let's get into the headlines for the week, Alan. So first up, FreeBSD Foundation has an August update. Yes. So we have a link to a PDF you can download talking about some of the recent activities. This includes details about various project development updates, the 10.1 release schedule, and some of its new features. Yay! Looking forward to that. Very eagerly waiting 10.1. Yep. They also have a short interview with Drew Levine in their Voices of the Community section. So you'll want to check that out. Most folks in the community know of Drew, and author of many books, and we've interviewed her in the past. Yep. So I think we have a link back to that if you want to refer to it.
It's in the show notes.
Cool.
Yeah, so apparently they're going to try to put out an update every month now to make it, instead of just getting 2 letters a year, if you want it, there's a little monthly update with the information and letting people know what's going on. So that's good.
That's cool. Okay. Well, fantastic. Also, they got a section, if you're into hardware, about some new FreeBSD server equipment. So you may want to take a peek at that.
Yes, a nice section in here by Glenn Barber talking about he was sent down to the FreeBSD project's co-location in New York, or in New Jersey, with NYI, and installed a bunch of new machines. So they replaced their old routers with new servers with more Ethernet ports, so they can have their separate link to each of the 4 rack level switches, and get that all hooked up. And it's all set up now to be basically a completely redundant mirror of the primary site, which is hosted at Yahoo in California. So now they have the full redundancy with everything replicated to the other side. Plus they have lots of other stuff going on. They put in some hypervisor machines that they're going to run a bunch of different hypervisors on, and allow developers to work inside those different environments to make FreeBSD perform better inside of Xen, inside of Hyper-V, inside of KVM, et cetera, et cetera.
Sure. Well, cool. And also, it wouldn't be a newsletter update without an update on funding as well. So they added that, letting us know where we're at for the year. Let's see. Do they have the thermometer updated on the website?
But they've almost reached $600,000 of their $1 million goal already. And about this time last year, they were only at $390,000. So that's a nice improvement over last year.
Yeah, they are definitely doing well.
I guess we'll have that story probably next week. A lot of that came as one big donation. And we'll talk about that one next week.
Yeah, we will get into that sneak peek for next week. So, cool. Okay, well, next up in the news, we have an article about NSD for an authoritative name server. So how to run it specifically on FreeBSD 10. And obviously with bind being removed from 10, you might be looking to replace whatever your old DNS setup was. So this article is actually pretty helpful. It's going to show you how you can configure and set up NSD to do the same thing, set up as an authoritative DNS name server.
With bind not being in base anymore, you can't just use that. You can install it from ports, but if you just need to do one or two domains or whatever, and you want something a little smaller than bind and faster, then NSD is definitely an interesting option. And so this tutorial walks you through that. Yeah.
And they also have a cool link to a similar article on Unbound, which is pretty helpful, which is what is in the base system. So how you can use that and how they can work well together.
So NSD, unlike bind, NSD is only an authoritative name server. So it can only return like A records out of a zone file on the disk of the machine it's running on. Whereas Unbound is the opposite. It's the recursive resolver. It goes out to the internet and looks up other people's domains for you. Now bind does both of those things, but in this case, they're split into two separate daemons, and that gives you kind of a little bit more control, and allows you to disconnect those two different components.
Sure. So definitely something you want to take a peek at if you've been doing any DNS on your FreeBSD box, and maybe the switch over to 10 is something you still got ahead of you and need to figure out how you're going to do without bind in the future. But we've mentioned this in the past. Hey, less bind is a good thing in our opinion.
Yes, and it kind of gels with our next story as well.
It does. So speaking of bind and Nginx were both removed from OpenBSD. So I guess they finally got around to removing that from OpenBSD. The base system now contains both NSD and Unbound, so users can transition over between 5.6 and 5.7, with 5.6 being slated for November this year and 5.7 May of next year.
And
so that's some
again,
cool news.
if you actually want bind, you'll still be able to get the latest version from the OpenBSD port tree.
Yes, definitely. But they've also removed Nginx, as I mentioned, from the base system in favor of their new custom HTTP daemon, which we had talked about in a previous episode. So that's cool to see some of those bits getting ripped out.
That was a little sooner than I expected, but I guess 5.6 doesn't come out till November, so they have a little bit of time left. But
they do.
It spun off out of the RelayD project, which is older and mature, and so I'm less concerned that it's not a completely new project that somebody just put together this HTTP daemon in the last month or two. It was spun out of an existing application when they just realized that they had built an entire HTTP server inside of this thing, and we're like, well, we can just split that off and use it separately.
We're doing a large percentage of the work already here. Let's just do the last bits to make it functional.
So yes, and we're hoping to have Ray Exploiter, the author of RelayD and the new OpenBSD HTTPD, on the interview soon, or on the show to interview him soon. So hopefully we'll have that for you soon.
Oh, that'll be cool. So let's see here. Next up, we have NetBSD news. So I guess the Japanese NetBSD developer has been uploading lots of interesting videos to YouTube, which we have a link to. And of course, being that it's NetBSD, they're all featuring it running on some pretty wild and weird and exotic hardware that you don't see every day.
Definitely interesting. Well, when we were in Japan, there was it was interesting to see so many NetBSD people, because you don't see that many of them at the conferences usually. But they have a bunch of different things on here that NetBSD running on HP 300 and getting the audio driver to work. They have NetBSD running on a Dreamcast and getting the SD card and MMC reader to work.
The Dreamcast is not dead, my friends. That's awesome.
There's some Luna 68K machines. We got all kinds of different stuff going on here.
Including running a modern Twitter client on a pretty ancient computer as well. So it says they demoed sound on most of them, but that is pretty cool
to see. Well, they got one here on some palm-sized something that looks kind of like a tablet, but older, almost like, I can't quite tell, but it looks like it almost has an LED screen.
Let's see.
So this is an old stylus-based thing that originally ran Windows CE, and they somehow got NetBSD running on it. This is one of those HPC MIPS processors. And yeah,
because why not?
if it's running Windows CE, you're going to want to replace that. And if it's a strange device, then the only option to replace it is NetBSD. But it just goes to show how flexible the NetBSD everything is.
They got NetBSD running Xorg on a cell phone here. It looks like a W03 WS0003SH playing itself on the NetBSD HP CARM.
If the battery hadn't swollen on my old HPC Touch, I probably would have gave that a try.
That is pretty cool, though. But, yeah, it's neat to see it running on all these old devices.
NetBSD/Atari on a TT030.
Oh, man.
That's some crazy stuff.
That is pretty cool. Let's see. We have a Cassiopeia palm-sized PC.
That was the Windows CE one we just looked at, yeah. Craziness. NetBSD does a lot of really interesting things.
It runs on more than just toasters, my friends. It runs everything. Cool. So they're from the same guy who did the conference
that we looked at.
We mentioned on the previous episode as well.
So he's got lots of interesting stuff.
Definitely want to take a look at that. Some neat exotic pieces.
Especially if you're into old or rare hardware. They have all kinds of interesting stuff going on here.
Cool. Okay, well, that's our weekly news headlines. So next up, let's mention the sponsor this week, of course, IX Systems, who introduced something new and exciting out at, was it VMworld?
Yes, they did VMworld. They introduced the TrueFlash, which is a TrueNAS Z50, which is an all SSD storage system. And so in addition to using compression, it's the first one where they ship it with basically everything you need to actually have deduplication turned on and have high performance. So they went and stress tested and found exactly what do you need to do in order to make the deduplication be really fast. And so using all SSD drives and a good chunk of RAM, they got it all set up here, and they said the best part is you get between 5 to 15 times deduplication ratios on stuff like virtual machines. And sometimes some stuff even higher. It obviously depends on your workload, but by getting even say a 10 times deduplication ratio, that means that you can turn your 20 terabytes of flash into 200 terabytes of storage.
Well, one of the cool pull quotes is they said, along with the logistical advantages, TrueFlash provides consistently lower latency than a traditional VM storage. Since there's no chance of any given I/O going to a spinning disk, VMware environments backed by TrueFlash can rely on consistent sub-millisecond performance of SSD, even when accessing cold data.
I guess that's with a regular TrueNAS where you have some SSDs caching stuff and everything else is on the regular disk, you can get really inconsistent performance because some stuff is a hit and so it comes back really fast, but some stuff you have to wait for the spinning disk to pull it up. And, you're talking 10 milliseconds there sometimes. Whereas the SSDs are, 100 or 1,000 times faster than that as far as latency goes. And so,
there's no slow path that you could possibly take now. It's just fast.
They mentioned
that is really cool.
So, if you're building an array that's got, because it's all SSDs and you can afford the slowdown of turning on deduplication, with it, while still having faster speeds than you would get with spinning hard drives. If you compare a 300 terabyte array that would be effectively 300 terabytes after deduplication compared to what you would have to actually build 300 terabytes using spinning disks, you're going to end up using a lot less complexity, fewer drives, so there's less chance of them dying and so on, less maintenance, less power, less space, and you can end up saving 3 to 4 times the total cost of ownership of the machine. And it's at least 2 times less expensive than most other all-flash solutions.
Well, congratulations to the IX guys for rolling that out.
I know Josh has been working hard on this for a while. So,
yeah, he has. So we should mention the URL, of course, ixsystems.com/BSD Now, where you can go and check out what this amazing company does and what they can do for you if this system is something your business may be interested in. Of course, you can get in touch with the guys there and let them know that we sent you. And obviously, they build more than just this, though. I mean, if you want something down to a small FreeNAS MIDI for under your desk, they can do that too, and everything in between.
Short depth 1U router up to, if you want that machine and if you want 300 terabytes of SSDs, you can have that.
Sure.
They will build whatever you need.
But,
and the best part is after they build it, they test it for you so that when you get it, it's ready to go. And
yep, it's already been battle tested, and any potential drives that, lemons from the factory, whatever, have been weeded out at that point.
As we've seen with studies from Google and Backblaze and everybody else, that hard drives tend to die within the first 24 hours of operation. So they run it for the first 3 days, find the problems, if there are any, and fix it so that you don't have to deal with it.
Yep. That's very cool. So again, ixsystems.com/BSD Now, and let them know that we sent you. Okay, we'll be back in just a moment. Okay, we're joined now by Sean Reb, or also known as Ladera. Glad to have you with us on the show today, Sean.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure talking with you guys.
Thank you for coming out.
Yeah, yes, definitely. Thank you. So first question we ask all of our guests, though, just kind of give us a little bit about yourself, your background. How did you get into BSD?
Well, it all started at the age of 10 when I was introduced to dysentery. No, just kidding. I was introduced to Oregon Trail on the Apple II.
Okay.
And I sucked at it, so all my characters got dysentery.
I usually died crossing the river, by the way, but that's me.
I was good at that part, but I fell in love with computers at the age of 10, and it just flourished from there. We didn't have a computer until I was around 14 years old, and but when I was around 12, I'm like, dude, how do I do this? How do I make these things work? And so I spent my evenings, because school, being so young, at the library, and just reading books on programming, on C and C++. Not having a computer, I just would write simple programs that sucked on paper and would hope they compiled. So that's where it all started. I was introduced to Red Hat Linux 6, and then moved from there to Mandrake Linux because it had a nice, pretty GUI, and then from there to Slackware, and then into FreeBSD. I got caught up in the whole changing the schedule drama that happened in FreeBSD 5.
Nice.
So I switched to NetBSD and became a NetBSD fanboy, which actually served me well. Back in the day, I had to set up a mail server back then for a company, and NetBSD and Qmail did the trick. But then when I was 19, I served a Spanish-speaking mission for my church in Miami, and left the scene for a couple of years. And then when I came back, FreeBSD was doing some awesome things, so I decided to take a look, and I fell in love with it all over again, and I've been a diehard user ever since.
Nice.
Cool. So the main thing we had to talk about was the ASLR and stuff that you've been working on. So for the people watching that don't know, could you tell us what ASLR and PIE are, and why we would want them?
Sure. ASLR stands for Address Space Layout Randomization. What happens is, without ASLR, a program will tell a computer where it wants to be loaded in memory. It says, I expect to be loaded at this place in memory. And if I'm not loaded there, then I'm going to crash. So ASLR, Address Space Layout Randomization, makes it so that programs can be loaded anywhere in memory. And specifically, position-independent executable support, also known as PIE or PIE support, further enables an application to be further randomized. This makes it so an attacker will have a harder time in exploiting security vulnerabilities or getting information disclosure vulnerabilities to work. It's not the end-all be-all of security. There are ways to defeat ASLR, but it's a good first step for FreeBSD.
So what type of attacks specifically would be prevented with these new additions to the system?
buffer overflow attacks and integer overflow attacks, format string vulnerabilities, well, some format string vulnerabilities, basically your very low-level vulnerabilities. Vulnerabilities like misconfigurations, like you've got sudo misconfigured, or if you're running a PHP web application, if you have cross-site scripting or SQL injection attacks or LFI, RFI, those kinds of attacks, ASLR will not help in those cases because that's talking at too high of a level for ASLR to even matter in those cases. We're talking low-level security vulnerabilities.
Right. So that's when you have a buffer overflow and it overflows. It's the attacker won't be able to tell what they're going to end up overwriting. Right.
Right. A buffer overflow says you have this buffer in memory where data is going to reside, and that buffer is user controlled. So whenever I type in a string to a shell, that string, that ls command, for example, is stored inside of a buffer. If a shell, for example, let's say bash, if the buffer was too small inside of bash for that command, then I could do nefarious things. I could attack bash and pop a shell, even though really I'm already on shell. That was the first thing that came to mind. But a buffer is just a place that you store data. If you write too much data, then that opens the door for other malicious things that can happen, such as giving the attacker a shell on the computer, or being able to distribute malware, things of that nature.
Cool. So what do you think prevented FreeBSD from having a security feature like this before now?
It's a pretty daunting task. There's a lot that goes onto it. It touches quite a bit of places, especially the virtual memory subsystem. The virtual memory system is a large, complex piece, and takes a lot of work and a lot of knowledge to implement ASLR and get that fully working in FreeBSD. FreeBSD supports a lot of architectures, and we have ASLR working on all architectures that FreeBSD supports, except for ARM. We do need a bit of help from people who have ARM experience. So there's just a lot of work to do to get ASLR into FreeBSD.
So why'd you choose to go with the PAX model instead of the OpenBSD model in this case?
Well, a few reasons. I've really enjoyed the PAX team's work, and Spender from GRSec. I've really enjoyed their work. I picked up this project from a guy named Oliver Painter in Hungary. I didn't pick it up. We're working on it together right now for the Hardened BSD project. All of our main development is happening inside of the Hardened BSD project, and then from there we upstream it to FreeBSD. And he chose the PAX model. He took a look at how NetBSD implemented their form of ASLR, and he found he liked their model versus OpenBSD's model better, so he went with NetBSD's implementation as his inspiration, rather. So the line of succession you could think of as PAX, NetBSD, and then FreeBSD.
Did you explain a little bit about what PAX is and what the difference is between it and the way OpenBSD does it?
I don't know OpenBSD's model too well. I was just glancing at it right before this, but I don't know how they implemented it that well. I've tried to stay away from reading other people's actual code, so that we don't taint our code with other people's, and then you get into legal battles and copyright infringement cases and that kind of stuff. So now that we have ASLR pretty much fully implemented, except for the ARM case, I'm starting to branch out and look at other people's implementations and compare ours to theirs. But during development, I've
Definitely
stayed away.
Have like a clean room type implementation.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay. So
makes sense.
You're going to have the option to disable the ASLR support entirely. Do you think that's a good idea? Or
definitely. So first and foremost, enabling, you have to add an option to your kernel to enable ASLR. By default, it's completely disabled. It's not even compiled in. And when you do have it compiled in, we do have a number of tunables that you can set via sysctl. But you have to, in order to be able to use those sysctl options while the system is online and booted up and doing its normal thing, you have to have a certain kernel option enabled. Right now, you can only set ASLR options and tunables at boot time via bootloader.conf. And so that way, if someone is attacking a system and does exploit the system successfully, they can't just turn off ASLR support. It's they can't. I guess they could with a kernel level exploit. They could flip the bit and turn it off, but not via normal methods, via sysctl, or they would have to reboot the system, and the sysadmin is going to notice that.
Yep, that's like the whole premise with secure levels and so on, right? So,
yeah,
cool,
precisely.
So, what platforms is this going to work on? I know you mentioned all work except for ARM, but will some of these have partial support, or?
No, because of the way it's implemented and because of how FreeBSD has implemented their virtual memory management solution. It works all across the board.
Nice.
Even with 32-bit Linux compatibility layer, ASLR works all across the board. We just have the one bug with ARM, and I'm currently trying to learn ARM in my spare time, but I've got so much to do right now because I'm looking also into setting the Hardened BSD project up as a 501c3, doing all that kind of stuff. So I'm doing a little bit of development and a lot of administration right now.
Sure.
So even like Spark and PowerPC and all that crazy stuff?
Yeah, Spark 64, PowerPC. I do thank you to SoldierX, which is an online hacking community. They donated to me a Raspberry Pi and a Spark 64.
Oh, nice.
So actually, they donated a BeagleBone Black. Sorry, I already had the Raspberry Pi. But they donated a BeagleBone Black and a Spark 64. So the only thing that we're missing is Itanium, which is now removed from head, and PowerPC.
Well, I know that Peter, the Beehive guy, what's his name now?
Peter Wem?
No, not Peter Wem. The guy that's working on Beehive.
Peter
Green. Yes. He's really into PowerPC, and I think he had some spare machines he was looking for a home for, actually. Yes.
Really? Okay, I'll get in touch with him. Is he a committer, I'm assuming? Then?
Yeah, okay. He's one of the two main guys working
stuff.
on Beehive, the virtualization stuff.
Nice. I'll get in touch with him. And we haven't tested on MIPS, so take it as you go. Donations are welcome if you want to see this work tested. So,
cool. So how does this all fit with ports and external applications?
Right now, we don't integrate with ports because in order to fully support ASLR, an application must be compiled as a position-independent executable, or PI, as I like to say. And that requires certain C flags and if you're using C++, CXX flags, and so it requires you passing in a certain option to the compiler. Additionally, you can't link with static libraries. You can't statically link applications when you're compiling as a Pi right now. But eventually, we will see integration with ports. I have planned to look into a per application uses flag that is configurable, via the dialog,
right.
As an option. An application will be able to say, I support being compiled as Pi, and then a user will be able to say, hey, I want to compile as a Pi for this application that supports it.
Seems like a good approach is as specific ports get tested and all right, this works well with ASLR and everything's happy and it doesn't have any of those static linkings that are going to cause a problem, and then
definitely, and it's very we're taking a very safe approach with it. It's by default off, so it's not going to cause any breakages once we do implement it and once we do get it in. So we want to do this really safely and make sure that nothing ever breaks. From the build infrastructure side to the installation side to the using side, or compilation side to actually using the app, that every single piece works right from the get-go.
Cool. So do you have any estimate on when we should see this in base? Are you guys thinking 11 release or later?
11 release, hopefully. We're running into multiple issues in the upstreaming process. We are currently in the upstreaming process, but we have a few issues. You'll notice in my BSD CAN talk that I mentioned that FreeBSD has few, if any, politics. And I think I should retract that statement now. There have been some conversations going back and forth on private mailing lists that I haven't, unfortunately, been able to be a part of and defend. And so there's more going on behind the scenes that I even know. And we have our patch up on Fabricator, also known as Fabric for short. And that patch is marked as public, so anyone can go and see. Just take a look at the FreeBSD Arch mailing list. That's where I publish our status updates, and so I'm hoping to get this in a 11 release. And I want to thank Brian Drury for all the work that he's done to date. He has been the one that has taken the blunt of all this political battle stuff. He is amazing to work with, and he is an inspiration to work with in getting this into FreeBSD.
Yes, he's a very good guy. We had him on a couple weeks ago. So after the ASLR code gets merged, what's next?
Ports. Right. Getting the framework for Pi in ports. And my overall goal is there's a third-party patch to the Linux kernel called GR Security. And it is an awesome patch. It hardens both the kernel and the user land. And my goal, overarching goal, is to port over all the features that make sense for FreeBSD from GR Security to FreeBSD. So not every feature makes sense from GR Security for FreeBSD, but those that do, I'm going to port. So that's the next thing.
Is that what the hardened BSD is?
Yeah. So hardened BSD is a new project that Oliver and I just launched, and it is just pretty much just a staging area for our code. It's where we put our bleeding edge development before we submit our patches upstream to FreeBSD.
Sure.
And we have some additional patches that just, it doesn't really make sense to upstream to FreeBSD to fight that battle, but is just nice for us to have on our end, like additional logging, some additional tunables. I've got the UJIT-FW integration with ASLR, the user space firewall, file system firewall. integration in hardened BSD, and that will not be upstreamed to FreeBSD as it stands right now. There's additional dialogue that needs to happen with that part.
Sure.
So, yeah.
Cool. Well, anything else you'd like to mention before we go?
I'd like to thank, again, Brian Drury, Soldier X, Pipax, and quite a few, this wouldn't be possible without even the nature of open source. Everything awesome that's happened in my life with my career and everything is because of the open source community and how talented they are and how open-minded they are and willing to teach newbies like me. I'm still a noob at kernel development, and it's awesome working with the FreeBSD team.
Yes, it is.
So I want to thank everyone that is involved in the project and anyone that will be involved in the project from here on out.
Cool. Great. Well, we're glad to help you get the word out about this. This is important work you guys are doing.
Yes, we're definitely looking forward to seeing it.
I appreciate it.
Cool. Well, thank you for being with us, Sean, and we'll be back in just a moment. And next up, we're going to be going into our news roundup really quick. But before we do that, of course, we want to mention Tarsnap again. So the URL for that's tarsnap.com/BSD Now. And if you've been watching for the past months, weeks, we've talked a lot about Tarsnap, but this week we have an article about it. I guess support for Ansible.
Yes, somebody's created an Ansible role and everything you need in order to automate your backups, so that you can have your servers actually start backing up stuff without you having to do it manually. Because if backups are only ever done manually, they will not ever be done often enough. So yeah, you want to cron that and get that going so that when you need them, you have a fresh backup and not realize, oh, I need to restore from backup, but I haven't done a backup in like a month or 2 or 3. It's like, no, let's get this set up. And your last backup was 1 hour ago. There you go, much better.
It just needs to be
done.
You'll
feel much safer after that.
See, and the funny thing about computers is they're really good at doing what you tell them to do. So once you schedule it, it just does it and doesn't have to rely on your faulty memory to try and remember to kick it off manually. But of course, we've mentioned Tarsnap in the past, and why you need to do backups, and especially since they're encrypted, which is a big deal. Colin has no access to anything that you may upload or back up. Doesn't care.
So therefore, is not able to even be forced to give it over because it's encrypted with your key and only you have that key. And you can make sure the key isn't being leaked by looking at the source code for the client, which is up on the website. And so, if you have one of those nice storage servers from IX or whatever, you still need to back up your data. And so hook it up to your Tarsnap.
Got to have your data offsite somewhere. Cool. So again, tarsnap.com/BSD Now. You'll want to let them know that we sent you. Get signed up. Real cheap to get started. I think $5 may last you months, depending on how much data you're backing up. It's done by the Pico Byte.
Pico Dollar.
Looks like, or Pico Dollar.
Pico Dollar per byte month.
Pico Dollar per byte month. That's right.
Colin's a math nerd.
Again. But the point is, it comes out to be cheap for you. So,
and get those backups done before I have to say I told you so.
That's right. There's 2 types of people in the world: those who've lost data and those who are going to. So try not to be one of the either one of those if you can. But, okay, cool. So let's go right into the news roundup. We have some Puppet news. So I guess an article about Puppet Master Agent installation on FreeBSD. Yes. So if you got a lot of BSD boxes under your control, or if you're just plain lazy, you probably looked into Puppet before, and that's not a bad thing. So this article is written by an author who claims there's a lack of BSD-specific Puppet documentation.
I found that a bit too. And specifically says he started with the BSD Magazine article from January of 2012, which is about where I started as well.
Sure.
But in the same case, he found that he needed, especially starting now, this is like 4 major releases of Puppet since then. And a bunch of it has changed. A couple
years later.
They removed like the Puppet kick and listen functionality, and many things have changed, and including some of the way you lay out the files on the disk and so on. And so he wrote a nice fresh tutorial that walks you through installing the newer version on newer FreeBSD. because back when in 2012 we didn't have package ng yet either. So I don't know if he actually covers that one, but if not, you should definitely.
Well, sort of, kind of. He walks through getting package ng set
actually,
up.
There's a Puppet module for package ng that does all the work for you. I'm just trying to see if he covers that.
No, he does most of the sudo setup.
It doesn't look like he actually covers that. But it's on GitHub. You'll be able to find it easily. I think it's also linked on the package ng page in the FreeBSD wiki. And that way, when you can set that up as the Puppet provider, and that way when you say, hey, Puppet, install Nginx, it will get it from package ng. Yep.
Just does it.
And actually, I just added a comment to his article earlier today when I was reading it for the show, and I shared my snippet of for using sysrc, which is Devin Teskey's tool that's in the base system now. And if you're using an older version where it's not, you can get it from the ports tree, which makes it easier and safer to edit like rc.conf and files like that via the command line. So you can just say, sysrc,
turn this on.
sshd_enable equals yes, and it'll add that to your rc.conf. Or you can say, put that in this other file, right? So when I enable Puppet, it goes in etcrc.conf.d/puppet or whatever, and a bunch of stuff like that.
Sure.
And it handles all that. So updating it in place, it will maintain the order. So if you change something from, if you add some extra flags to say, sshd_flags, it will keep it in the same place instead of deleting that line and adding a new one at the bottom. So it's even nice when you have, like, if you're starting off with a nice template config where, you've grouped the things logically in a way you like to read them. When you use this tool to edit it, it'll keep everything you already had and just add the new stuff to the bottom. It's quite nice, and this little recipe allows you to use it inside Puppet very nicely.
Oh, very cool. So a couple things he mentions in the article, some of the advantages of using this type of tool for deployments, even if you don't have maybe a large number of systems, you're just using it on a couple, still can come in handy to automate that. And then, of course, the bulk of the post is on master and agent configuration.
I think the biggest advantage to Puppet is just because compared to like the old way, which was like a script where you'd like go through all these steps.
Sure.
Puppet's based on a manifest, so it has this list of what the server should look like. And then when you run it, it checks that list. And it's like, oh, well, that's not installed, so I'll install it. And so if that step fails, when it runs again, it'll be like, oh, look, that's not installed. I'll install it. And it reports back to the master, hey, this didn't work, so that you can help find the problem if there is one or whatever. But the other great thing is that just by using Puppet to do things like that, it means when it's time to replace that server or upgrade it, or if it dies and you have to restore it, you have this manifest of everything that's supposed to be on there. And if you use Puppet for everything, that means that there's not that one app you installed over there and forgot you installed it, right? Or, I don't have the config for that. Sure. But if Puppet has all your configs, then it's easier to back it up. And mostly it just means replacing servers gets much easier when you have this manifest of everything that's supposed to be on there and how it's supposed to be configured.
Yeah, you're less likely to forget steps you had to do.
Exactly. It makes recreating a machine so much easier. Or cloning it, right? Like I have one config for like a video server that there's like 80 of them out there now.
Yeah.
So yes, it's nice to see the
again, if you're interested in
tutorial. I might have to look at actually putting more of the little bits that I've put together out there and make it easier for people to get going with this.
And we'll have the link in the show notes if you want to take a look at that, if that's something you may be interested in doing. Okay, next up we have some miscellaneous pfSense news this week. So a few articles about it here. So first one, we have an article about the hunt for the ultimate free open source firewall, where pfSense is obviously going to be a strong contender there.
They covered Untangle and pfSense, IPFire, IPCop, Smoothwall, Endian, Viata, and ClearOS, and Zentyal. And there's like, what about MonoWall? Go on and talk about a bunch of different stuff. They definitely like pfSense and Untangle.
Cool. So the next article talks about how to log NAT firewall states, and our producer TJ made a little comment on here about how this is a good way to find out which family member has been
right,
torrenting.
but you can use it to see all kinds of different things, really.
Sure. But interesting article. It's actually just more like a couple paragraphs on how to do it, how to set it up on your pfSense box. So that is helpful there. Let's see. The next article, the third one here, shows how you can automatically back up your configuration files, which, again, if you're relying on that box heavily, you want to back that stuff up.
Yeah, if you spend a whole bunch of time getting your pfSense set up just so, you're definitely going to want to back that up. Stick your copy in your tarsnap.
Looks like there's a lot of curl calls here where he's fetching different bits of the configuration
from the pfSense web interface, and it compiles down into a file, and then yes, we should shoot that file off to pfSense or to tarsnap. Somebody should make up a nice little package for that and make it easier. You know, a plugin for pfSense and maybe even one for FreeNAS. It's just like back up my config to tarsnap.
That's right.
Should
that
bug Colin about
that. So the fourth article we have shows up how to set up Pixie booting with pfSense, which is similar to a tutorial we did in the past, but still it's cool to see. I mean, there's just so much you can do when you got a full operating system.
Well, there's a couple times where you might want to do this. Obviously, a pfSense box that has no disk means the disk can't fail, and there's less chance of something going wrong. And the other advantage is if you have multiple pfSenses, especially if you're using CARP or whatever to have high availability, it's very useful if they all have exactly the same configuration. And the best way to do that is boot them off exactly the same configuration.
Yeah, no chance of it being different. So, this article will walk you through how to set it up, how to use TFTPD32 to enable that, and then different Pixie environment stuff. Looks like he uses some Pixie Linux.
Walk through actually testing it in VirtualBox and make sure it all works, and then deploy it out onto their physical machines.
Nice. So, again, another interesting article. Okay, cool. Well, next up, something a little different. We got time machine backups on ZFS, an article about how you can set that up with FreeBSD 10. So, of course, if you've got a Mac and you need to keep it backed up, a FreeBSD server with ZFS can take the place of an expensive time capsule. So this post is going to walk you through setting up Netatalk and MDNS for a very versatile time machine backup system.
And then there's just one small change you have to make on the Mac to make it see the unsupported network volumes as supported by Time Machine. And then you'll be able to have the destination of your Time Machine backup be your FreeBSD machine with your ZFS volume. And now all your files are backed up nice on your RAID Z array, which, you can have snapshots and all the fun stuff.
Definitely. So it's just a single command on the OS X side, and then it works just like a regular external drive. So this is actually a really cool article, really simple to do. So anyone who's got Macs on their network, you may want to take a look at this.
The other advantage is that your gigabit LAN tends to be faster than your external USB hard drive. You probably get 2 or 3 times the performance backing stuff up. Plus, obviously, having it on ZFS is a lot safer than having it on one external hard drive that has no redundancy itself.
Sure. This is very true. And, with all the internal checksumming and stuff, like you want to know if
that's the other thing is ZFS will make sure that, your backup is still good, right? You run a scrub and you'll know for sure that, hey, all the data is still there.
Life is good there. Yep. Cool. Okay. Last up in the news roundup, we have a desktop preview of the Lumina BSD exclusive desktop environment, which we're working on the PCBSD project. My brother Ken Moore is doing that. So Kenny's posted an update on the PCBSD blog with some screenshots of the current state of the desktop. A lot of new features have been added. He documented a ton of those in the post. Yeah. Fancy wallpapers and stuff. But this is all stuff he got added, I believe, for 10.03, which we're going to release in the next couple weeks. So take a look at that and kind of preview it, see what's coming soon. And before anyone asks, yes, we are going to put it in the FreeBSD ports tree. We try and update our ports quarterly when we do our quarterly updates. So you'll be having that in the FreeBSD ports tree as well soon. And we might be doing a BSD Now episode soon about this. Maybe a tutorial and showing it off, interview, etc. So stay tuned for that. Okay, well, that's the end of the news roundup for the week. We'll be back in just a moment. Okay, our first question this week in our feedback section is from Gary asking about NAS authentication. So he says, I would so appreciate if you could give me some advice on setting up authentication on shares. From my understanding, NFS bases security on IP, so I don't think I want NFS. I'm not clear on how CIFS handles authentication. He says, I tried mount using CIFS with the username and had odd results. Then he said I had a big moment and realized that the odd results were because of setUISD and GID not being the actual name. There was no mapping of users from machine A to B, etc. So he says I am a programmer, not an IT guy, although I don't mind playing around to figure things out. The reality is there's so little time in the day. I just want this to work correctly at this point so I can go back to coding some of my hobby projects. Later I can fiddle with it. I'd be very happy if you guys could help us out with some sound advice for setting up for home use. I realize that a directory service is probably needed. If I can avoid it, great. Else I have a Raspberry Pi I can put it on. So he said the configuration is thus. He uses a NAS in his home deployment. He has 4 Linux clients, 2 OS X clients, and 1 future PCBSD client. He said, here are some of the sample generic users, him, his wife, kid 1, kid 2, groups, and then, him, wife, kid 1, etc., family adults. He has some different data sets with different permissions. I assume you're looking at these here with me, Alan, so far. Looks good. He said he did some of the above CIF mounts and everything worked, manually mapping, but it's a really crappy solution, and renumbering each machine is probably worse. Besides using a directory service, is there another way to make this work?
Well, there's a couple things. So NFS, it's not completely IP based. So basically, you say this is the set of trusted IPs, and no one else is allowed to connect. And then after that, what it means is over NFS, when you're in the trusted range, it means I trust that when you say your user number 1001, that you are actually that user. Right, and that's why NFS has the IP-based restriction. So that means that if you have consistent numbering on all your machines, then you can use permissions that way. The problem is that if each machine has the main user as user 1001, then NFS will see those all as the same person, not as different people. Although I think it's slightly different if you're using NFS v4. I haven't played with it that much, but there's an extra daemon you have to run, and it does the sharing of the user spaces. So you might want to look at NFS v4, although he doesn't really mention it, but I'm assuming it's a free NAS. Yeah,
possibly.
Because the other advantage to using NFS v4 is you can use the NFS v4 ACLs, which will let you have more expressive permissions than you get with just user group other. That way you can actually say this one is I have read write, wife has read write, kids don't, or whatever. And a bunch of things like that. It just lets you have more than one person defined and have more permissions and have those permissions be inherited and all that fun stuff. Although that in itself has some complications and so on. But yeah, NFS can do a lot of what you're looking for, especially if you use v4.
I was going to say, so I'm not sure, like you said, if he's using FreeNAS, but FreeNAS should do most of this stuff for you. And you can do it via CIFS or NFS or whatever, and it has like the nice GUIs to do it all.
What happens is you have a separate username and password database that resides on the NAS, and that's how people log in and connect. And so you would create users with the same names that they have on their home machine or their client machine, and set. But basically, you have to set separate passwords. So even if the user wife exists on your NAS, unless you're using a directory service, Sample will have its own separate database, completely separate from the local user database that you'll have to define the passwords in. I'm not quite sure if FreeNAS does something there to make that easier or not. I've not used FreeNAS in a while.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure how that works either. I don't really use a lot of Samba on my home network.
Well, I do, but I have one user, me.
Oh, well, yeah, that makes it easy, very straightforward. But of course, we'll post this question online. So if anybody else out there who is a NFS or CIFS guru has some maybe tips on how to do this a little easier way.
Because the other one he mentioned was about stuff talking about using the nobody group, like FreeNAS and so on. The reason for that is so that people that are connecting from foreign machines don't have permission to do anything except for access those specific files you give them access to, rather than, if you're actually for example, when you're doing regular NFS v3, normally, user ID, whatever, on the machine they're connecting to maps to the same user ID on the NAS machine.
Sure.
And so, for example, that means that root on one machine is the same permission as root on the file server, which most likely is not the case you actually want. Although when you're doing when you're setting up your NFS shares, you actually can override that and say specifically, root on any other machine is actually treated as the nobody user. So that, in that case, it can be interesting because a regular user can end up having more permission than root when coming from the foreign machine because, the user wife is allowed to access these photos, but root is mapped to nobody who's not allowed to do anything. Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting.
That's how it works for us
cool.
at work here. We have root is mapped to like the nobody group, and so it only has the same access as the web server, whereas the user itself actually is allowed to play with their files and do whatever. But
Cool.
for directory services, it depends what your NAS is doing and stuff. Like he mentions having to running the directory service on a separate Raspberry Pi. I don't know. Again, I don't know, but I thought that FreeNAS had something for LDAP built in. Maybe not. Yeah.
It does. It has LDAP and Active Directory support.
Yeah, so you might be able to have
John Hickson over at IX does
so
a lot
you
of that.
might be able to have the directory service just be part of the FreeNAS. But again, he doesn't specifically say whether he's running a FreeNAS or not.
Sure.
Yeah.
So, all right, well.
But yes, all those problems are
one way to deal with
solvable,
that.
and yeah, you shouldn't. That mount command you have there is longer than it really should be.
Sure. Okay, so next up from Cedric asking a question about Docker on BSD. He said, hey guys, first of all, I want to say great show. Thanks for all the hard work every time and on that weekly basis. Very impressive. He said we keep him company on the hours-long commute to work every day, as long as podcasts are available at least, doing something useful while standing in traffic jams. Don't envy you in the traffic jams, but I'm glad we can help make it a little more enjoyable for you. So he says he's a network engineer experienced in data center, now getting involved in DevOps and programming role. He has past experience on Linux and is a heavy user of Mac OS X. Never really gave BSD a good chance as he never found the right project to use it for. He said now for a project he's working on at work, he said we use Docker. All of it's running on Ubuntu Linux, so it's Linux. But the more I listen to your show, the more I'm itching to throw FreeBSD on there and port everything there. Everything is Puppetized, so it should be doable without too much headache once I get the base system set up. He said the only problem is that we heavily use Docker. It basically sets up Linux environment in microseconds, does whatever it has to do there, and then destroys it. We use it from an application server where a user runs code, and when the code is done executing, the environment is destroyed, which is very scalable and secure.
Docker does not provide
so
security
secure.
features. It's not the same as a FreeBSD jail.
No.
If you wanted to make the system use jails, I have a Puppet recipe for using EasyJail to create a jail. You can install your apps in it, do your stuff, and then kill the jail when you're done. The way mine in particular set up is most of my jails are long-lived. It actually, Puppet on the host sets up the jail and runs it, and then the jail actually pretends to be in a whole machine and actually runs its own separate instance of Puppet inside of it, and basically acts as a whole new machine that just popped up, like a VM or something. Although you can, by fiddling around a little bit, control the jails from the one Puppet install that's on the host. But so he mentions that Docker moving away from LXC and doing their own thing, and that they are trying to port to other OSs. I don't know if they're actually working on making it.
I did some looking in their GitHub tree, and there is some FreeBSD references in there and whatnot. It doesn't look like it's done yet.
It would be interesting to see Docker available with jails, because you actually get security features with the jail that you don't get with the Linux container. Yes, that'd be cool, although I don't know anybody working on it.
See, I don't know if they're adapting to do jails or if it's doing like the OS X method where it's doing VirtualBox wrapper and all this
Yeah, because
stuff.
VirtualBox works
who
nice
knows?
on FreeBSD as well, most times.
Yep.
So,
Cool.
yes, we'd love to hear more about this, and but we don't know anybody doing it.
That would be interesting. If anybody who hears this is somebody who's working on making Docker work on FreeBSD, send us an email. We'd like to talk to you. That could be a potentially interesting interview.
Yeah. So next up.
Okay. Cool.
Caldwell
Next up.
writes in about BSD jobs. He says he recently started listening to your podcast and he enjoys it. You've all been convinced that BSD is superior to Linux. However, why should I... what?
bother learning more.
Oh, I guess it's supposed to say bother. He says he's relatively young and looking to break into the sysadmin field. Linux and Windows have some certifications that I can throw on my resume to spice things up. And he says BSD doesn't. Actually, BSD does have the BSD A certification, which I have. Do you have that one? Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay.
No, I do not. I've never actually taken it.
Yeah,
right.
But I did.
I've always. Well, the thing is, I don't run any net or open,
right.
So I'm always like.
The reason why my score wasn't near the highest ever was because I don't remember how to update a package on NetBSD. Yeah.
All right. Or then Dragonfly too.
The Dragonfly wasn't so bad because I did a lot of FreeBSD 4. So, but yeah, it was the NetBSD updating a package that got me, and then something about OpenBSD's installer or something, which I had never done before back then.
Oh, sure.
But anyway, there is the BSD A certificate, which is a written exam. It's 100 questions, multiple choice. And then now they're also working on, it's already in beta, the BSD P exam, which is a professional. And that one is a timed practical exam. So you're given a virtual machine, your choice of FreeBSD, OpenBSD, NetBSD, or Dragonfly, and a list of objectives. Make a DNS server that serves this zone, set up this web server, set up this email server, whatever. And you have 2 or 3 hours to do that. And then they check it by connecting over the network and making sure it works. And they give you a score. So there are certifications, and they're well respected.
Well, he said something about how he found it. He didn't think it was very mature yet, and there's really no demand for somebody with BSD skills as far as you can tell.
Quite a bit of demand.
There's quite a bit of demand.
Yeah, some of it's a little highly specialized. You're not going to find all that many of them up on like dice.com or something, but
monster.com.
But yeah, there are a bunch of channels. There's FreeBSD Jobs Twitter. There's a couple of mailing lists. The LinkedIn group has a number of stuff all the time. But if you have the right skills, you can definitely get in there.
Sure. So he says, why should I continue learning BSD? It doesn't matter how superior a product is if everyone wants you to have knowledge on something else. Well, like I said, I think times are changing. You've heard about a number of big companies we've mentioned on the show in the past that are using BSD. So, there's definitely a market for it out there, and we see it as growing, if anything, in the past years.
Yeah, there's definitely stuff. There's, I don't know. When I look at the FreeBSD people I know, they work at all kinds of places. It's like
they do.
Big ISPs, big CDNs, Cisco, Google. Everybody's got Facebook people. Or, sorry, FreeBSD people. Even Facebook.
Yes.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, well, next up from Carrie, he's asking about, I guess the subject is Mouse D. So he says, awesome show. Thanks for putting the effort and time each week and to curate and share events and developments happening across the BSD. He said it's great for commuting material to listen to. A lot of people like listening in the car. That's cool. So he says he has 3 questions that deal with a minor issue. He said he's starting to get frustrated with it. Is mouse pointer drift? When I'm trying to click something, the pointer will start to drift towards the bottom of the screen, causing me to miss what I'm trying to click on. My platform is a PCBSD 10.1, or I guess 10, and a Mad Catz Rat5 USB mouse. He said he's been digging in to try and remedy the issue. He's found that mouse D has the -T flag to terminate drift. He's been playing with various values for the pixel count and millisecond count, but the issue remains. So he says, is there a tool you can use to find the drift so I'm not shooting in the dark so much?
I don't know about that one in particular. Does he mention how he's trying to set the one value?
Well, some of it here, it looks like he's doing mouse D flags, but I'll mention mouse D isn't used for XOR.
Right, and mouse D was just for the console, and I don't know if it actually ever did USB mice. Or if you, it doesn't.
It does. Yeah, it does do USB mice. But yeah, like I said, if you're running through XOR, like you're kind of fixing the wrong area.
And so you asked about the correct way to restart mouse D. So yes, the correct way to restart it would be service mouse D restart. In this particular case, the problem was that it was configured to look for a PS2 mouse, which you didn't have connected, and so it threw that error.
Sure. So it looks like the protocol he's using is for XORG, he's using auto, dev sysmouse. I don't think there's any special driver for like the Mad.
No, it's just a regular USB mouse. I've never suffered from drift, although
I have yet to see it on any of my systems here. So
on my laptop, obviously a touchpad doesn't have that as much. Although I've pulled out a USB mouse and plugged it in before. Yeah, that's really a generic X question, less so of a specific FreeBSD question. I don't know.
Yeah, so I think by putting mouse D in your queries, you're probably shooting yourself in the foot a little bit because you're going to get all the docs for mouse D and not for fixing it with X. It would probably be the same fix as you'd see on a Linux. So, I mean, you could just search xorg mouse drift, and see if there's some fixes out there, how to configure. Because I'm looking here, I mean, the first 5 links that come up on Google have different options you can set in your xorg.conf to try and adjust the drift to your liking. Another thing to look into is the X input command. You might be able to fiddle with that.
Yeah, there might actually be a graphical interface for fixing the mouse drift.
Yeah, X input is command line, but it's utility to configure and test X devices, and there are a ton of flags you can set in there to enable and disable all kinds of different stuff. So I would take a look there first. That's probably where you're going to have the best results. So, yeah, see, that was part of his question. He said, I might be looking in the wrong area with mouse D altogether.
Mouse D is for the text console mouse support, which I've only ever used like once.
Yeah. Yeah.
But so I SSH into most of my machines, right? I'm a server guy.
Well, cool. Mm-hmm. Well, hopefully that answered your question, Carrie, and get back to us if you do find a fix. We can update maybe the question with that in the bottom. Okay, well, that's the end of our feedback and questions. So we're going to wrap up the show here. And, of course, mention that all the tutorials will be posted in their entirety at bsdnow.tv. So refer back to those. There's plenty of older ones on there, a wealth of information on how to do a variety of different stuff. The S-Tunnel tutorial, that's right, our very first tutorial ever, got updated with some new fixes and information. So you can take a look at that one. Also, send all your BSD-related questions, comments, show ideas, or topics or stories you want mentioned on the show to feedback@bsdnow.tv. That's the only place we monitor, so do try and send stuff there. We'd really love to feature some more articles from viewers, be it about one of the main BSDs, of course, or it could be something like pfSense, FreeNAS, anything cool you find or write. Go ahead and send it in to us so we can highlight it in a future episode.
Like, and of course, the puppet stuff that we showed off today, and just more talking about it. But yeah, if you know. That's kind of part of the open source thing, is that even if you're not writing new code or whatever, if you mix things together in a cool way, or just, the best way to remember how to do something is to write it down. And so by building a tutorial, you'll learn to do it better, and you can share that with other people. And if we'd love you to send us those, and we will send you some traffic from the show.
Okay. Also, you can watch live Wednesdays at 2 p.m. Eastern, 1800 UTC. So check it out. Watch how we make the show before it gets cut up and packaged for you Friday. And, of course, next week is something special. So we'll just leave it at that. And be sure to join us, maybe live if you can. That may be a good excuse to try and tune in live. So, excellent. Anything else you want to mention, Alan?
That's good. So, see you guys next week.
Well, thank you guys so much for being with us this week. We'll catch you next week. Well, we've done a number of SSH tutorials in the past, but most of them rely on the fact that you have a certain level of control on the network. In some cases, you need to be able to access a system that's behind a firewall. So this guide's going to show you how to do just that, reversing the connection and accessing an internal system from the outside. The only requirement in this case is that the firewall allows outbound SSH traffic. You'll have to have access to the machine behind the firewall at some point for this to work as well. So the -R switch is going to play a key role in this very short tutorial. Since we'll be reversing the connection, be sure your client system has a publicly accessible SSHD running, and then we can go ahead and get started on the system behind the following.
Okay, so today's tutorial is fairly simple, but very, very useful. So you have a machine that's behind a firewall, and so from the internet, you can't connect into it in order to SSH in. So we're going to create a reverse tunnel where the machine in the protected network will connect out to us. Now, this can be used in one of two ways. In a typical setup, what you would have is your machine behind the firewall can connect out and will connect to your machine at home or whatever, where you are publicly accessible. The issues there is, if it's your machine at home, maybe the IP address changes a lot or it's not always on and other things. So instead of a direct connection from the server on the internal network to the server out on the internet or whatever, or the machine out on the, we can use a server in the middle. And then you can just kind of do that SSH chaining stuff that we talked about a couple weeks back. But basically, we'll have the machine behind the firewall do a reverse tunnel out and connect to the intermediary server. And the server, and then you can connect there and do your chain connection in order to connect through that reverse tunnel. That's also very useful when both machines are behind restricted firewalls. They can use the internet server out in the middle as a meeting place. So in order to do this, all we have to do is run our little SSH, and we will basically configure it to listen on port 9050 on localhost. And then we'll connect as Ellen at tango.scaleengine.net. Right, so that's running now. So now if we check, we'll see we have this connection out to the internet. So this machine here, which is behind a firewall and can't be reached from the internet, has now made an outbound connection to the world. Now, if I quickly switch the input over so you can see, there you go. So now this is a different machine that you're seeing now. And if I just SSH to port 9050 at localhost, and now log in with the username and password of the machine behind the firewall, I'm now connected to the machine behind the firewall. So the protected machine SSH'd out to the public machine and set up listening on localhost on port 9050. Then I just connect, either connect by SSH or whatever to the public machine, and then made an SSH connection to the loopback adapter on that port 9050, and now it's joined those two sockets together, and I'm now accessing the machine behind the firewall via the internet. And that allows me to access that machine that normally I wouldn't be allowed to do because of the firewall. You can do some other stuff, including running the SSH connections over port 443, so that when the machine, for example, when we saw that 9050 localhost 22, that 22, if we replace that with 443 and reconfigured our SSH daemon to be listening on port 443, that way the connection going from inside the network out to the public server would be over port 443 instead of 22, so the firewall would be more likely to allow it. If, for example, it doesn't allow SSH, then you can disguise it as regular HTTPS traffic. Or you can combine it with our S-tunnel tutorial, where you can actually make it regular SSL traffic. There's a couple of other things you can do. On the client machine, you can update the SSHD config. So on the machine that the tunnel connects to, so the far end of the tunnel, you can enable client alive interval 300. And what this will do is it'll make sure it sends a keep alive packet every 5 minutes so that that connection doesn't get dropped. Or more specifically, if it's going through a firewall with NAT, you don't want the rule to expire. So by making sure you send a packet every 5 minutes, that'll keep that rule fresh and it won't expire. And you can also enable the TCP keep alives so that you, again, keep that connection alive. And then the other thing you do, obviously, is set up a cron tab, right? If the machine on the internal network is making this connection out, if the connection gets interrupted, that'll close. So you can make a cron tab that'll make sure that stays up. And they also talk about, in the tutorial, talk about running it maybe in a tmux if you want to be able to see what's happening with that. But as usual, the full text of the tutorial with additional notes and links and reading and everything you need to customize this to fit your setup is on the website, bsdnow.tv. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next week.